Welcome back to the Selling Life Podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about why you should treat your word like it is a contract. Every promise you make is a contract, not just with other people you may know, but with yourself. The moment you stop keeping your word, you slowly stop trusting yourself. And when you do not trust yourself, it is hard to build that confidence, the discipline, or the respect, which isn't good. Start here. First truth. Why does your word actually matter? Well, there has been research across neuroscience, psychology, and behavioral science looking at how our words, commitments, and behaviors affect ourselves and the people around us. And one of the biggest things I took away from researching this is that your word doesn't just affect what someone thinks about you, it can affect whether they trust you, whether they believe you, and whether they want to depend on you again in the future. Here are 3 reasons why your words matter. The first one is your reputation. Research from areas like behavioral economics and psychology has studied how cooperation and trust develop between people. When you consistently follow through on what you say, people begin learning something about you. They learn that you are reliable, and reliability becomes valuable. Because think about the people you personally trust. Chances are they are probably people who have proven themselves over time. If they tell you they are going to be somewhere, they are there. If they tell you they're going to do something, they do it. Their word has value because there's a history behind it. The second reason is consistency. Trust usually isn't created by one massive promise. It is created through smaller interactions happening over and over again. Every time you follow through, you are giving someone another reason to believe you. And every time you don't, you are giving them another reason to question you. The third reason is integrity. And anyone can talk about having high standards. Anyone can say they're loyal. Anyone can say they are hardworking. Anyone can say that they are trustworthy, but integrity gives those words evidence. Your behavior creates a track record, and eventually that track record becomes your reputation. There is also research examining what happens when promises are broken. Studies involving the brain have looked at how people respond to trust, dishonesty, cooperation, and broken commitments. The bigger point I take from that research is simple. When your actions repeatedly do not match your words, people start becoming more cautious around you. They have to question whether what you are saying is actually going to happen or not. And that's the exact opposite of what you want your word to represent. There's also a concept in economics called cheap talk. Basically, words are easy when there is not anything behind them. Anybody can say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to change. I'll get in shape. I'm going to be there. But saying something doesn't automatically make it valuable. Your actions are what give your words value. That's why reliability matters so much. Credibility isn't something you can demand from someone. You build it, one action at a time, one commitment at a time, one promise at a time. And the same thing applies to leadership. If you are leading people and constantly saying one thing while doing another, eventually people notice. They stop listening to the promises and start watching the pattern. That's why your word matters, because eventually your actions tell people whether your words actually mean anything. Second truth. Now, let's talk about the contracts you make every single day. And no, I am not talking about the contracts where you are signing your name on a piece of paper. I am talking about things like, oh, well, I'll wake up early every day. Or, oh, I'll go to the gym. I'll start on Monday. I'll read tonight, or I'll work on my business. Every one of those is a contract with yourself. You said you were going to do something. Now the question becomes, are you actually going to do it or not? While researching this episode, I came across several different areas of psychology that study how people respond to trust, expectations, cooperation, and unwritten obligations. One example is what's known as the trust game. Researchers have used versions of this experiment where one person is given money and has the opportunity to send some of it to another participant. The amount sent can also increase. And then the second person decides whether they're going to return some of that value. What is interesting is that people don't always behave according to pure self interest. Trust can create an expectation of reciprocity. Someone does something for you, and you feel like you should return that trust. Research associated with Paul Zock has also examined oxytocin and its relationship with trust and cooperative behavior. The bigger lesson here isn't about the money. It's about how quickly humans create expectations with each other. Someone trusts you, and now your response matters. There's another interesting example involving conversation. Research into human communication has found that people across different languages and cultures tend to transition between speakers extremely quickly. We are constantly predicting when another person is going to stop talking, when it's our turn, and how the interaction is going to continue. Most of us never consciously think about it, but we are constantly operating under unwritten expectations. The same thing happens professionally. Psychologist Denise Rousseau's work on psychological contract theory examines the unwritten expectations that can develop between employees and organizations. You may have an actual employment contract, but that is not the only agreement that you are operating under. People develop expectations about how they might be treated, what their responsibilities are, what their employers will provide, and what they owe in return. When those expectations are suddenly violated, people can react like something important was taken away from them, even if it wasn't specifically written into their formal contract. And then there's research on what happens when people watch someone else violate social expectations. Studies by researchers including Ernest Fair and Urs Fischbacher have examined third party punishment. People sometimes become willing to give up something of their own just to punish someone they believe behaved unfairly. Think about how powerful that is. People care about fairness and trust even when they aren't personally the ones who were wronged. All of this comes back to one thing: humans care about whether other people honor expectations. So, why wouldn't you apply the same standard yourself? If you tell yourself, I'm going to do this, treat it seriously, because every time you follow through, you're teaching yourself that your word has value. Now, what is one promise you've been putting off that you are not admitting to? The third truth: every broken promise will cost you something. You lose confidence, you lose discipline and motivation. You stop believing in yourself. Eventually, your goals become a choice to you. And breaking promises doesn't only affect you, it affects the people who trusted you too. There has actually been research examining what happens inside the brain when someone makes a promise and then decides whether to keep or break that promise. Researchers Thomas Baumgartner and Ernest Fear were involved in neuroimaging research that examined promise breaking during an investment style experiment. Participants could make promises that encourage another person to trust them, and then later decide whether they were actually going to honor what they said. Researchers observed differences in brain activity associated with breaking those promises. Areas involved with things like conflict, emotion, and cognitive control showed activity during dishonest decisions. What I take away from that is this: breaking your word isn't always as simply internally as saying, whatever, it doesn't matter. You know what you said, you know what you promised, and now your actions are conflicting with it. There's another cost: the social cost. Research by Nicholas Epley and Ayolet Nizi examined how people respond to promises that are broken, kept, or exceeded. And something interesting happens. Breaking a promise hurts how people evaluate you. But going way beyond what you promised doesn't necessarily give you an equally massive boost. Think about that. If you tell someone, I'll meet you at 5, and you arrive at 5, you did what you said. That's the expectation. You don't deserve a massive reward. You simply just kept your word. But if you don't show up at all, then that will be remembered differently. That's why I think keeping your word should be the baseline, not something extraordinary. If you said you'd do it, do it. There's also the professional side. Organizational psychology uses the term psychological contract breach to describe situations where employees believe an employer hasn't fulfilled an expected obligation. Research in this area has linked these perceived breaches with things like lower engagement, reduced trust, greater intentions to leave, and other negative workplace outcomes. And that makes sense. Imagine someone constantly telling you, I've got you, I'll take care of it, don't worry about it, but they never actually do. Eventually, you stop asking them, you stop depending on them, and eventually, you stop believing them. That's the cost of a broken word. So, now I want to ask you this: if your word was a legal contract, how many would have you have broken this week? Think about that for a moment. Fourth truth is that people trust actions more than words. That could mean your friends, your employers, your family, your relationships, or a business. Trust is earned through consistency. People trust you when you actually show up. So ask yourself, can people trust what you say? Research across psychology and behavioral science has spent decades looking at how humans decide whether another person is trustworthy. And while words obviously matter, actions give people evidence. Someone can tell you they are reliable, but what happens when you actually need them? Do they show up? Someone can tell you they are hardworking, but what happens when nobody is supervising them? Do they still work? Someone can tell you they are loyal, but what happens when that loyalty actually gets tested? That's when words become actions, and that's when people learn who you actually are. And anybody can make a claim about themselves. Your behavior proves whether the claim is true. So do not spend your life trying to convince everyone who you are. Show them. Let your actions speak. Because eventually, consistency becomes difficult to argue with. The fifth truth: your reputation is built quietly. That could mean showing up on time, or doing what you said you were gonna do, returning the calls instead of just ignoring them, finishing the work you started, and last but not least, admitting to the mistakes that you may have made. None of those things are impressive on their own. Nobody is going to throw you a parade because you showed up on time. Nobody is going to congratulate you every time you return a phone call. Nobody is going to give you an award because you admitted that you were wrong. But those little things can start to add up. And over time, people will notice. A trusted reputation is built through consistency. It's built through habits. It's built through results, not through constantly telling everyone how trustworthy you are. There are three core things I think that matter here: consistency, integrity, and evidence. Consistency means doing the small things correctly over and over again, not just when you are motivated, not just when people are watching. Every day. Integrity means honoring your commitments even when there's pressure to do otherwise. It is easy to keep your word when keeping it costs you nothing. The real test happens when keeping your word becomes inconvenient. And then there's evidence. Let the results speak. If you constantly have to tell everyone, trust me, at some point you should probably ask yourself why they need convincing. Build a history that speaks for you. You want people to hear your name and already know. That person shows up. That person gets things done. That person keeps their word. And that reputation isn't built loudly, it is built quietly. The sixth truth: integrity when nobody is watching. Character is not public, it is private. Integrity when no one is watching means doing the right thing because of your own character and values, not because you are going to get praise, not because you are going to receive some reward, and not because you are afraid somebody is going to catch you. It's about who you are behind the closed doors, because that's when there's no audience influencing your decision. Here are three reasons why I think this matters. The first one is self trust. Keeping small promises to yourself strengthens the relationship you have with yourself. Think about it. If you constantly tell yourself you are going to do something and then don't, why would you eventually believe yourself? But if you consistently follow through, you start creating evidence. You told yourself you'd train. You trained. You told yourself you'd finish something. You finished it. You told yourself you'd wake up at a certain time. You got up. That is self trust. The second is consistency. You shouldn't need an audience to become the person you say you are. If you are disciplined publicly, but completely different privately, eventually those two versions of yourself are going to collide. Be the same person. The third is character. Your reputation is what other people think about you. Your character is who you actually are. And there is a difference. You can fool someone about your reputation, but when you are alone, you know the truth. You know whether you actually did the work, whether you kept your promise, whether you gave everything you had. And that's why integrity matters the most when nobody is watching. Seventh, for me personally, one place I've learned how important your word is would be the gym. There are plenty of days where I tell myself I am going to train, and then when the time actually comes, I do not feel like going. I'm tired, maybe I had a long day, maybe I'd rather just stay home, and it would be really easy to tell myself I'll just go tomorrow. But I try to look at it differently. I told myself I was going to go. So I'm going. Because if I constantly break the promises I make to myself, eventually, what does my own word even mean? And the same thing applies to this podcast. There are times when I don't feel like sitting down and working on another episode. Researching, writing, recording, editing. Sometimes I'd rather do something else. But I made the commitment to keep building this. So now I have to follow through. And I've realized that every time I do, I am building trust with myself. It's not really about one workout or one podcast episode. It's about becoming someone who does what they say they are going to do. Because I want my word to mean something, not only when I give it to someone else, but when I give it to myself. The eighth truth. Now, let's talk about why the small promises matter. People sometimes think it's only the big promises that count, but they are wrong. These small promises matter too. It could be something as simple as making your bed, first thing in the morning when you get up. It sets the tone for the day. Or maybe you tell yourself you're going to read a certain number of pages in a book. It may not seem like a big deal at the time, but you made that commitment to yourself. So follow through with it. Because think about what happens when you start keeping those small promises. You begin proving to yourself that when you say you are going to do something, you actually do it. Research into habits helps explain why these smaller behaviors can become so important. Psychologist Wendy Wood has spent years studying how habits influence everyday behavior. Her research suggests that a large portion of what we do every day is driven by habits, rather than completely new decisions every single time. And that is why small actions can matter so much. Something doesn't have to be massive to change your life. If you can repeat a positive behavior consistently, it eventually becomes easier to continue doing it. Think about the gym. One workout probably is not going to completely transform your body, but consistently training over months and then years, that's different. The same thing applies to reading. 10 pages might not seem like much, but 10 pages every day becomes thousands of pages over time. The same thing applies to keeping your word. One small promise may not seem that important, but when you keep hundreds of small promises to yourself, you are building something bigger. You are building self trust. You are teaching yourself. When I say I'm going to do something, I actually do it. And that's why you shouldn't overlook the small promises. Because those small promises become your habits. And those habits become part of who you are. The ninth truth is stop overpromising. Because treating your word like a contract does not mean saying yes to literally everything. Actually, sometimes it means knowing when to say no. Overpromising can damage trust. It can hurt your reputation. And it can also create unnecessary stress, which is never a good thing to have. Because when you commit to more than you can realistically handle, you create a gap between what people expect from you and what you are actually capable of delivering. Think about someone who constantly says, "Yeah, I'll do that. I'll be there. I got it. Don't worry about it." But then they only follow through half the time. Eventually, those promises don't mean very much anymore. And maybe that person isn't intentionally lying. Maybe they genuinely wanted to do everything they promised. But intentions aren't the same as results. That's why you have to think before you give someone your word. Can I actually do this? Do I actually have the time? Am I willing to make this commitment? Because sometimes saying, "No, I can't promise that," is more honest than saying yes and then not following through. I'd rather someone be honest with me from the beginning than promise me something they already know they probably cannot deliver. That is why treating your word like a contract also means being careful about what you promise. Don't make 10 promises and keep 5. Make 5 and keep all 5. Say less, follow through more. Because every time you give someone your word, you're putting your reputation behind it. And the 10th truth is legacy. When people hear your name, what do you want them to think? Do they think they always keep their word? Or I'll believe it when I see it? I hope it's that they always keep their word. I know I would never want to be remembered as someone people say, I'll believe it when I see them do it. Because think about what that actually means. It means your words don't carry enough weight on their own anymore. People need proof before they'll believe you, and that's not the kind of reputation I want to build. I want my word to mean something, and I think everyone listening to this should want the same thing. You want people to know that when you make a commitment, you are going to do everything you can to honor it. That doesn't mean you are going to be perfect every single time. Things happen, circumstances change. Sometimes something genuinely comes up that you could not control. But there should be a difference between something happening once and constantly having another excuse for why you did not follow through. Your reputation isn't created by one moment, it is created by patterns. People remember patterns. If your pattern is showing up, they'll remember that. If your pattern is keeping your promises, they will remember that. If your pattern is doing what you said you were going to do, they will remember that too. And eventually, that's the part of the legacy you leave behind. Every time you keep your word, you strengthen your character. Every time you break it, you weaken your self trust. Success isn't built by making bigger promises, it's built by keeping just the small ones. So remember this. Think about what you are going to say before you even say it, because you are going to be expected to live up to it. And that's what I want you to take away from this episode. Your word should mean something. When you tell someone you're going to do something, you should do it. When you make a commitment, you should honor it. And when you make a promise to yourself, treat it with the same respect you would if you made that promise to someone else. Because every time you follow through, you are building a reputation. You are building discipline. You are building trust. And most importantly, you are building character. You don't need to make massive promises about what you are going to accomplish. You don't need to tell everyone what you are going to do. Sometimes it is better to say less and let your actions speak for you. Because eventually, people should be able to hear your word and know that that is enough. They shouldn't have to wonder if you are going to show up. They shouldn't have to wonder if you are going to follow through. Your word should be your contract. So this week, pay attention to the promises you make to other people and to yourself. Do not say it unless you mean it. And if you say it, do everything you can to follow through. Until next time, stay humble, keep your word, honor your commitments, and keep ascending. I'll catch you in the next episode of Ascend in Life.